Welcome back to Homestead Development. Today, I'm going to show you how to install residential windows like this into a 1,500 square foot barn dominium build. So we're going to be installing some residential windows with brick mold into this metal building. You can take the brick mold off by cutting it with a razor knife. However, I'm going to leave it on there because I like the aesthetic of it. We're going to be framing out in between these metal posts with some 2x4s and then placing the window in. So let's get a measurement on our window and figure out where we're going to install it. So this is a 3 foot by 5 foot window, so it should be 36 inches by 60 inches. Now the brick mold adds another 1/2 inch to each side, top and bottom. So it should be 37 by 61 inches. Let's go ahead and verify that. So we see here that we have 37 inches on the width and 61 inches on the height. So when I measure out and cut the hole in the wall, I'm going to add an extra 1/4 inch to the width and 1/4 inch to the height. That way I have room to install my trim all the way around, and then the window will not be too snug to fit in there properly. So normally when you install a window, the bottom of the window is either 2 or 3 foot off the ground. However, with these taller windows like this, you don't want the top of your window to be above the top of your door, because then you won't have that nice line on the outside of your building. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure my door, and I'm going to place the top of all my window openings at the same height as the top of the door. So my door is 82 inches tall, so the top of my windows is going to be at 82 inches, and then whatever the remainder of the height is will be the distance from the floor. I'm going to center the window in this cavity here between these 2 vertical posts. We have 57.5 inches. My window is 37 inches wide, but my opening is going to be 37.25 inches wide to allow some room for the trim and to make sure it's not too tight when I go to put it in. If I subtract 37.25 from my 57.5, that will give me 20.25 inches. I should be 10.1/8 inches off of each side. So I'm going to mark my 10.1/8 here, and I'll mark my 10.1/8 over here. And I'll verify this measurement. Should be 37.25, and it is. The bottom of my window is going to be 21 inches off of the ground. So I'll come down here and I'll mark my 21 and find my bottom corners. So now that I have my 21 inches marked from the floor to the wall, I'm going to use a level to make sure I have a nice level straight line across here. Now I'm going to draw my vertical lines using the marks that I made earlier. So now I'm going to measure 83 inches to the top and draw my top line of the opening. I'm also going to verify that my case opening is the same width at the top, middle, and bottom before I start cutting this out. Since the metals run horizontally and you have all these ribs, we're going to use the nibbler on these 2 sides, and then we'll be good to use the shears to cut across the flats at the top and the bottom. So now I'm going to measure the distance in between these 2 verticals. That way we can cut out our bottom and our top support. Normally that would be called a header. However, this is not load bearing in any kind of way. This is just supporting the framing for the window itself. We're also going to cut some boards to box in this window. So the bottom and the top is going to be the width of the inside of the window without the brick molding that's on the outside. So the inside width of the window is 36 inches plus 1.5 inches on each side to give us a total of 39 inches. And that accounts for the 2x4s that are going to be sitting on it on each side of the window. So let's cut those out, and also 2 sides at the same height as the window, and we'll get this all assembled. So now we'll come 36 inches over. So that'll put us at 46 on this side. That's where our window will be. Now we need to mark 1.5 inches on the outside of both of those measurements. So we got 47.5 over here and 8.5 over here. So now I'm going to attach this bottom plate, which is going to act as the windowsill for now. Make sure it's nice and flush on the outside face. I like to pre-drill my holes before I put the screws in to give it less of a chance of splitting the wood. So this will be the windowsill for now. We got our nice brace here and the bottom that's going underneath the window. Now we'll flip this over and we'll attach a couple of brackets. That way we can mount it to the verticals. So that completes our bottom brace. We'll go ahead and build out our top brace as well, and then we'll start installing them. All right, so now we're ready to install this support underneath this window. We want the finished surface of this wood to be 1/2 inch above this cutout. So I marked both of these at 20 inches, which is 1 inch below the bottom of this case opening for the window, but the 2x4 on top will bring the top of the wood to 21.5 inches, which gives me 1/2 inch for the brick mold. Now let's make sure that our windowsill is nice and level. Now that it's level, we can go ahead and put some screws into both of these angle brackets at the bottom. So now we're ready to trim out the window. We need to go ahead and measure and cut all of our trim. So we're going to start with a nice piece of J channel. You can see that it is in the shape of a J, and that's why it's called J channel. You have this nice flat right here that will slide under the siding, or if you don't have siding up, you can use this flat to just attach this J trim to the building. And then you have the bottom or the outside, which is a 1 inch, and then you have the front, which is a 1 inch. This is a residential R-panel J trim. They do make other dimensions if you have commercial or a different style panel. So I already have the measurements on my window. I have a 3 foot by 6 foot. With the brick molding on the outside, it is 37 inches wide and 61 inches tall. I'm going to start by measuring and cutting the side trims. I like to use these factory edges that don't have tin snip marks on them. That way it's a nice clean finish. So my window is 61 inches tall, so I'll measure to 61 inches. So I'll add 1.1 inches to that measurement. So I'm marking this piece at 62 1/8. I'm going to mark this all the way around with my square. And now I'm going to cut off all the excess. So I'm going to be using some right-handed snips or some green snips to cut off this excess here. You always want the side of the snip that goes underneath to be facing the side where your cutoff piece is going to go. That way it doesn't mar up the surface. Once you have both sides cut, you can simply fold this over a couple of times and that metal will break in the middle. And now you have a nice clean cutoff side over here and your factory finished side over here. The factory finished side is going to face up. We're not going to be doing anything else with that piece. Now the side that we just cut on, we are going to be doing something with that. Since we added 1.1 inches here, we're going to pull that measurement back and we're going to mark 1.1 inches back. At this point, you could also verify that it is the length of the window, which for us is 61 inches. So now we're going to make this mark across the bottom face of the trim. You don't need it on the front or the back. So on this side of the line, we have the height of our window, and on this side, we have 1.1 inches. So we'll go ahead and cut this tab. You'll notice I'm using green snips here, and I'll be using red snips to cut this other side. You want to come inside this corner, and I actually like to go to the outside just a little bit. That way there's not a roll that's going to hang up on the trim that this is going into. So you just cut this back to the line. And then we'll cut a little sliver out of this. Doesn't have to be much. That'll make this easier to bend down and also keep things from hanging up on it. And I'm going to switch over to my left-handed snips so I can get inside this corner here. Once again, I'm gonna cut me a little sliver out of this. I'm going to fold this tab outwards. And this is going to hook into the bottom piece of trim. So now on this front face, I'm going to cut a 45-degree angle here. I'm going to come up about 1/8 inch and leave this end boxed here, and we're going to be cutting that off later. Now you might see that this metal here is hemmed over on the inside of here. I'm going to take and open that up just a little bit. That way this can slide over the lip of that bottom piece of trim, and when I cut this off, it'll cinch it back together. At this point, you can go ahead and take off your plastic wrapping on here. Since my window is so tall and these sticks come in 10-foot lengths, I'm not able to cut both sides out of one trim piece. However, I can cut the bottom out of this cutoff. That being said, I have me another stick right here, and we need to go ahead and cut our other side trim piece. So we'll mark at the height of the window, which is 61 inches, and then we'll add 1 1/8 inches, which will put us at 62 1/8 inches. We'll make a mark there as well. The inside line, we only need to scribe across the bottom face of this trim. The outside line, we need to scribe all the way around. Once again, the bottom of the snips I'll have facing away from the piece that we're using, so this will be the cutoff over here. Now we can fold this over a couple of times and break it off on that line. So I'm going to cut right here in this corner up to that line, and maybe even a little to the outside. That way that curve doesn't face in, and that'll prevent this from hanging up on the other trim that it's going into. I'll cut me out a little sliver here. Doesn't have to be very big. We'll do the same thing on this side. Now we'll fold this out at a 90-degree angle, and we'll go ahead and make us a 45-degree miter cut from this corner here to about 1/8 inch up from this corner here. If this hem closed on you, you want to open it up just a little bit with a flathead screwdriver. Now go ahead and remove the protective plastic film, and we'll get busy making the bottom trim. So we're going to measure the length of the window. We're going to add 2 inches. Now we'll make a mark 1 inch in from each side of this piece. Now let's scribe across the top of this, and we'll scribe across the top of this piece as well. And now this line out here, we're going to mark all the way around so that we can cut it off. Once again, I want the bottom of my snips to be on the cutoff piece. That way I don't gouge up the surface with the snips. Also, when you're cutting with snips, don't ever fully close your snips. You don't want the tips to touch because it'll make a little burr. Now we'll fold this and break this piece off. We'll use our snips to snip into this line at each corner, and then we'll break this tab off. Now let's remove this protective film. Now on our top trim, we need to mark 1 inch back on each side. And then we'll cut our tabs. There we go. Now we are ready to install the trim. We'll go ahead and start by installing our bottom trim. Now before we set this all the way in, I'll go ahead and grab one of the side trims. So this tab is going to go inside of this cutout right here. And also the backing plate on the side trim is going to go in front of the backing plate on the bottom trim. And the outside on this side trim is going to be all the way on the outside. Now we'll take the other side. We'll set the tab inside the bottom trim, the backing plate also inside the bottom trim. And then the front will come out. We'll make sure that this hem goes over the bottom trim. So we'll start by setting the top trim in on one side. Make sure that tab goes inside of the side trim. Now we'll pull the side trim out on the other side. Go ahead and get this top piece in. And we'll set it back in place. There we go. So I'm going to apply some silicone to the inside perimeter of this, about 1/8 to 1/4 inch away from the inside of the trim. This is going to allow the window nailing flange to be completely sealed to the trim. I'm going to add some extra silicone in the corners to make sure it's sealed up nice and tight, and also a bead across the bottom to keep water from rolling back into the window opening. I also went ahead and purchased foam closures that I'm going to be stuffing inside of here between the trim and the siding to help prevent water from penetrating to the inside of the building. Now let's install the window. Make sure you get it lined up really well, and then this bottom nail flange will slip in between this wood and the J-trim. So if your side piece trim exceeds the bottom of your bottom trim, you can simply take your snips and cut off the excess. And there you have it. Now if it lines up pretty good like this one did, you can just leave it as is. Now we're going to install our header, which, like I said, this is not a load-bearing header. This is just our top framing support. Now that we have our top brace in, we can go ahead and put us a few screws on the top and the bottom. I'm going to put one directly over the corner of the trim on each side. One important thing to note is that if you do have vertical panels for your siding, you're going to want to make sure that the edge of your windows is in a flat section on both sides. That way, you can actually apply silicone before you put your trim on, and then apply another bead of silicone inside of that trim, and you'll be sealed up on both sides, which will make it much harder for the water to get inside of the building. However, I have horizontal panels, and that's why I use the foam closures. I will be putting a bead of silicone on the inside of all this trim to help keep the water out. So now that we have the screws in the top and the bottom, we're going to go ahead and run screws up both sides to snug this siding panel to the wood framing and compress that foam closure strip to keep water from getting in behind here. I'm going to stick with the same pattern that they had on these other screws, so I'm just going to start right here. So that's how you install a window into a metal building. Hope you enjoyed this video. Give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and turn on your bell notifications for future videos.